You are listening to Book Clips, a mini podcast where authors and narrators introduce you to lesbian fiction. You can find a buy link and more information about this book in the show notes. Enjoy!
Hi, I'm Andrea Bramhall, and today I'll be reading for you from my new novel, Rock and a Hard Place. I'll be reading from the prologue, so I hope you enjoy the story. Jayden Harris flipped up the collar of her fleece, rubbed her hands together and ducked inside the cavernous mess tent easily capable of seating 100 people at a time. Coffee and a spot of lunch sounded like a good plan, then a little more sleep before she had to get everything ready for her group to head out of Everest base camp at midnight on the start of their summit bid. She checked her watch, 11:35 a.m. Okay, so maybe it was a little early for lunch, but she couldn't help but smile when she noticed the date on the chronograph. April 25th, 2015. 3 years. Damn, that time had gone so fast. A gust of wind through the open door tugged at her hair. She quickly gripped the long, dirty blonde curls that whipped about her face and secured them with a band at the nape of her neck. "Hey," a familiar voice called. Jayden turned and smiled when Rebecca stepped in line next to her, but Rebecca didn't smile back. "What's wrong?" Jayden asked. "Pain in the ass Pete wants to go out and drill his self-rescue skills again. That's not a bad thing, babe." She suppressed a groan of mutual frustration. So much for her afternoon of relaxation, but on the mountain, safety always came first. A nervous climber meant a dangerous one. If an afternoon of skill drills put Pete at ease, it could save more than just his own life down the road. "Yeah, I know," she replied with a heavy sigh. I wanted to spend the rest of today with you, that's all." Jayden's smile widened. "I know the feeling, but we can celebrate our anniversary when we get back." This time Rebecca did smile as she stepped up onto her tiptoes to close the 6-inch height difference between them and kiss Jayden's cheeks. Her eyes twinkled in seductive mischief when she stepped back and whispered, "I'm going to hold you to that," before pressing her lips firmly against Jayden's. When Rebecca finally pulled back, she took the coffee mug from Jayden's hand, took a swig, then handed it back. "Thanks." She sighed and ran a hand through her hair. "You stay here and finish your coffee. I'll take him out this time." Jayden shook her head, loath to shirk her responsibility. She was a team leader, the owner of the company. The safety of the clients was hers to ensure, not Rebecca's. No matter how capable and experienced Rebecca was, the book stopped with Jayden, and she knew it. "Thanks, but I should really do it." Rebecca frowned. "Look, I don't want to argue with you, babe." She spat out the endearment like an insult. "Not today, but it really, really pisses me off when you do this." "Do what?" "Treat me like I'm just another pretender on the mountain. I do know what I'm doing, you know." Jayden held her hand up in supplication. "I know that. I'm not trying to do that to you, I promise. It's just that, yeah, I know. There's only the great Jayden Harris who can teach anything to anyone about survival on the fucking mountains." She turned to leave the tent, but Jayden caught her arm before she could walk more than 2 steps away. "That's not fair, Bex. I have a responsibility to them." "Yeah? What about your responsibility to me? Don't I matter? I'm your girlfriend, your partner, I thought. Yet you continue to treat me like just one of the other lackeys. That's not true." "Actually, yeah, it really is." Jayden shook her head. So much for not wanting to fight today. She didn't want to do this again. Jayden knew that Pete was a capable climber who carried the skills he needed well embedded in muscle memory. His insecurities were in his head, and Rebecca was a good, strong climber and a competent teacher. For all her worries about the elements of their unpredictable environment, Jayden was probably micromanaging. Did Rebecca have a point? Was she treating her like some underling rather than equal partners she professed they really were? Were the escalating problems in their relationship all her doing after all? "Fine. I'll take a nap this afternoon while you take him out on the ice." Rebecca's frown morphed into a triumphant grin as she slipped her arms around Jayden's waist, holding her close. "Thanks." A shiver crawled up Jayden's spine, making the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. She grimaced, trying to place the draft, and quickly turned about her, looking for the open tent flap, but there was nothing. She shook her head and ran her hand over the back of her neck. "Bex?" "Yeah, babe?" "Be careful out there." Rebecca wrinkled her nose again, her brown eyes dancing in the dim light of the mess tent. and her lips quirked into that cheeky, half-cocky, half-sexy grin that Jayden loved so much. "Always am, Jay. Always am." Jayden watched her go, still unable to shake the feeling that something wasn't right. She felt itchy, restless. The peace she always felt in the mountains, even in the busiest peaks, was missing. She sipped her coffee and took a seat at one of the tables, determined to forget her uneasiness and focus instead on the challenge before them, guiding a group of first-timers to the summit of Everest. Their route was well planned. Ladders were lashed together to provide bridges across deadly crevasses. The ropes were bolted into the rock and ice to give them some protection on the exposed faces they needed to conquer as they went. Provisions were waiting for them at camps 1 and 2, along with the oxygen to help them resist the effects of altitude sickness and the devastating result that was pulmonary edema, drowning in one's own bodily fluids whilst trying to breathe. It's not a pleasant way to die, but it was certainly one of the most common up on the mountain. Yeah, it was risky. That's what made it exciting. It's what got the blood pumping, and they were ready for this. She was ready for this. Nevertheless, she couldn't sit still. She downed the rest of her coffee and stepped outside. Row upon row of small yellow dome tents ran around the inside of the encampment. Red ones ran down in the other direction, and a scattering of multicoloured ones dotted the rest of base camp. Each colour represented a different trekking company. The blue tents of her own Adventure Trekkers company were close to the middle of the encampment, a good, safe place in a safe camp. Not much about a tour up Everest could be classified as safe, but base camp was. Was her uneasiness about the state of their relationship what had got her on edge? She frowned. "I'll just go and apologise to her again. Maybe we can make a plan to take some time off, go somewhere romantic, see if we can sort everything out." She checked her watch again to see if she had time to catch Rebecca before she set off with Pete. It was already 11:50 a.m. Probably not, but she checked the tent anyway. It was empty. Damn. The red, yellow and blue triangles of the bunting around camp fluttered on the breeze as she decided how to use the restless energy. She was within 2 minutes of the medical tent, and picking up the first aid kits and the medical supplies would save her a job later. "Hey, Jay," Yost Clabban said as she walked in. "Hey, Doc, how's it going?" Quiet day today," he shrugged. "Lots of people have already headed up to the higher camps." "I saw that. What was it? 110 at Camp 1 tonight and 70 at Camp 2? Yeah, crazy. This mountain gets busier and busier every year. I came out here for a quiet life, you know." He laughed and clapped her on the shoulder. "I hear you, Doc. Not so much of a people person myself. You climbers, you never are. That's why you're crazy enough to go chasing all those summits." She chuckled, true her words, Doc. "So, what can I do for you today? First aid kits and basic med supplies, please. We're heading up tonight." Of course. I'll just..." What the hell? The ground beneath her feet shook. No, it was more than that. It felt more like it was rocking, pitching from side to side like a boat rolling on a wave. First one, and then a second, the pitch and fall growing as one movement slipped into another. "Earthquake!" she shouted. The doctor's eyes opened wide and they both ran to the tent flap, but the grey sky above them shook. And then Jayden realised it wasn't the sky that was shaking. The ground beneath her feet quaked so violently she struggled to keep her feet beneath her. She grabbed onto the doctor's shoulders for stability. He too stumbled against the tremors and jostled her against her. Just a little. Just enough to see it. She tapped him on the shoulder and pointed as words failed her. A curtain of white tumbled down the mountainside, the worst nightmare of anyone on the mountain. "Avalanche!" she yelled into the sonorous rumble that split the air. Ice and snow and rock careened towards them with a speed and ferocity that she could never have imagined. Base camp was days away from the summit, days of grueling walking, climbing and suffering, surely too far away for the angry torrent of ice to reach them, right? But what about those already on the way to camps 1 and 2? What about Rebecca? Oh my God, Rebecca! She didn't know if she shouted the words or whispered them. She couldn't hear it over the growing rumbles splitting the sky like it had erupted from the bellows of the earth and shot straight up to the heavens. She shouldn't be out there. It should have been me. Oh God, please! The doctor tugged on her hand, his mouth open, his lips forming words she couldn't hear. She shook her head. I should never have given in to her. She tore her eyes away from Jost and glared up at the sky. She'd never believed in God or heaven. It didn't matter. She'd gladly sell her soul to trade places with Rebecca right now. Please, please just let her be okay. But even as she pleaded, she knew the odds were against her. Really? It would take a miracle. The wall of ice charging at them was going to claim lives on the mountain today. They stared in silent horror as the roar of hell grew louder and became terrifyingly clear that base camp was never going to be far enough away. Not by a long way. The tsunami of snow and rock rained down towards them. Rocks heavy enough to crush bones became missiles hurtling towards them at the speed of a bullet. They needed some sort of shelter against the oncoming avalanche. Canvas offered little protection, but it was the best they had. Without it, they'd be relying on luck alone in a 1,000,000-to-1 shot at survival, if they weren't buried alive and frozen to death. So Jayden did the only thing she could think of. She pushed Jost in front of her, shoving him back into the medical tent behind them, and down under one of the gurneys as far from the door as they could go, the ice right on their heels. She tried desperately not to think about Rebecca out there, too far away to even find the limited protection that a tent could offer. I should never have let her go. The tent rocked under the force of the avalanche, smashing against the fabric, tearing it apart under the pressure. The wall closest to the door gave way under the torrent, poles flattened, gurneys crushed, and the 2 nurses and doctors sheltering under them, buried alive. Jayden raced forward only to be held back by Jost. Wait, he screamed into the thunderous noise that surrounded them. Then, in an instant, the sound was gone. An eerie silence filled the half-crushed tent, and the last of the debris settled. Slowly, Jayden wiggled her fingers, flexed her toes and ankles, and pushed herself into a sitting position. Her eyes took in everything, but her brain just couldn't comprehend what she was seeing. She couldn't grasp that there were nurses and doctors, people she knew, buried under the snow and ice in front of her. A whimper brought it all rushing in. She shoved Jost's hand from her shoulder and rushed towards the mound of debris, careful not to climb on it lest she stand on a person and crush them further. She started at the side, clawing through it with her bare hands, determined to release those she'd seen buried in there. They might have a chance at surviving if she could get them out of that frozen tomb. She pushed at rocks that were too heavy for her to lift and nodded her thanks when Jost joined in the effort. She scraped at snow, sharp shards of ice. Finally, she reached a hand, outstretched and gloved with the strap of an ice axe wrapped around the wrist. She didn't recall seeing anyone dressed for the outdoors inside the tent when it collapsed. The only explanation her mind could grasp was that someone out on the paths had been swept back in along with the rest of the debris. She worked swiftly, freeing the form until she could drag it out of the hole and turn it over. And then she screamed. No! Rebecca's head hung at a sickening angle. Her throat severed in a jagged cut more than halfway through. Blood dripped from the ice axe hanging from her wrist. The brown eyes that had laughed at her concern less than half an hour ago were open and staring up at her, unseeing. They'd never see anything again. I'm Andrea Bramhall, and this has been reading from the prologue of Rock and a Hard Place. Thank you very much for listening. Bye.
This was an episode of Book Clips, a mini podcast where authors and narrators introduce you to new books with a short reading. Get the book now by clicking on the buy link in the show notes. This link works for Amazon US, UK and Canada. If you use our links, we earn a small commission from Amazon. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to rate and subscribe to this podcast.